Cool. So again, thank you so much for coming to the UI UX design workshop. This is the first workshop we're doing for the track for ShellHacks 2020. So I'm super excited to be here giving this workshop to you guys. So a little about myself before I begin. My name is Cesar Villa Garcia. I'm a software engineer at JP Morgan Chase. I actually started working at the firm about a year ago or so, having a great experience so far. I graduated from FIU in 2018 with a bachelor's in computer science. Currently, I'm an alumni advisor for UPE, and I was also president back in from 2014 to 2018. So I was a student leader for quite a while, and I was around to kind of see the baby steps that we were taking to grow UPE and get it to this massive membership we have now from the very first, even before the very first ShellHacks. So it's been an awesome experience to be part of that growth over the years. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is share with you guys the agenda and just trying to see more or less what the points we're going to touch on for this workshop. So the first thing we're going to do is just talk about what is UI UX, talking more about that. And then talking about what are the differences, right? So what is UI versus UX? And then also talk about how they both work together, right? Also, the next thing we'll talk about is the UI UX process. So how you can get started with thinking about this idea, thinking about how to build for your users and how to actually get your user experience right for a product you're making, right? In this case, for a project this weekend. I'll also be talking about some UI UX tools. Among these is Figma and Adobe XD and Sketch. So I'll be talking a bit about those as well. So first things first, what is UI and UX? So as far as UX, it stands for user experience design. And UX is a human first way of designing products. So pretty much UX design encompasses any and all interactions between a potential or active customer that you might have for a product. And as a scientific process, you can apply it to really anything. So if you're looking to design any kind of product, even like cars, furniture, appliances, or anything like that, you can definitely apply a UX design process to it. And even though it's a scientific term in a sense, it's been mostly used within the digital space since the time it started. And one reason for this is because the tech industry started blowing up around the time that UX became a thing. So it got really closely attached to tech. And essentially UX applies to anything that you can really experience. So things like a website, a coffee machine, or even just going to a store, like these are all things that have some kind of experience aspect to them that you have to think about. So the user experience part of UX design just refers to the interaction mostly between the user and the product or service that you're actually putting out there. So this is something really important to keep in mind. Now, the design part of UX considers all the different elements that shape the entire experience. So these are, we start thinking about how the experience makes a user feel, how easy is it for the user to actually accomplish their tasks. And this is really important, especially with mobile devices and laptops and any kind of devices that people use in their everyday lives, right? So for example, how easy is the checkout process when you shop online, like on Amazon, let's say, right? How easy does your online banking app make it for you to manage your money? So in this case, for example, I guess the Chase mobile app has a certain UI or UX that it's supposed to pretty much make it easy for you to look at your transactions and transfer money and whatnot. And pretty much, the whole main purpose of UX design is just to create an easy, efficient, relevant, and just all-around pleasant experience for the user that you have. So to summarize UX in one quote, it's that user experience encompasses all aspects of the user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. In the case of you guys, for example, this weekend, we're not thinking really about a company, but more about the product itself, right, that you're building. So pretty much when you're thinking about the UX for your project, think about the way in which a user will interact with it, whether it's a mobile app, a website, or even hardware, anything like that, right? How can you make it as easy as possible for your users to be able to have a great experience while using your product? And that's something that's very key. And it's really important, especially, in a typical hackathon when it would be in person and you would actually, let's say, demo your project and give the judge your phone or your laptop to check it out. that's where they actually get to test out the UX. If they have a great experience using it, if they're able to easily see what you created and it's just very intuitive, they'll have a great user experience, and that would definitely give you more points when it comes to judging. This year, everything's virtual, but definitely make sure that through your video submissions that you will do on Sunday, that you definitely speak about how you're tailoring your product to make it easy to use for your entire audience of users that you have. Now, what about UI? So user interface design is pretty much the complement of UX. It's all about the look and feel, the presentation and interactivity of the product. A user interface is pretty much the point of interaction between the user and a digital device or a product. So for example, the touchscreen on your smartphone or the touchpad you use to select like what kind of coffee you want from a coffee machine that you might find. And in relation to websites and apps, UI design really considers, again, the look, the feel, and really the interactivity of the product. And it's just all about making sure that the user interface or the product is as intuitive as possible for your users, right? So that is something that's very important, and making sure that that user interface is clean. It's all the action items are very easily discernible, and that the user can actually go from one point to the next. And again, all of this also means taking a close look at each other, and at each and every visual and interactive element that the user might encounter. So again, when I was talking about going from one point to the next, you start thinking about the icons that you're using or the buttons that you use, even the typography itself, the text, right? It should be text that should be inviting and maybe playful, or it depends really on the product you're making. I don't think you would want to see a mobile interface with like Comic Sans or Times New Roman or something like that, right? So you might want to create some special treatment to your fonts that you use for your designs. And make sure to keep that in mind for your projects as well this weekend. Try to explore and just find examples online to get inspired by when it comes to looking at your UI and your UX. Another thing too is color schemes, the spacing that you have as well. That's something that I see a lot. I see that sometimes people try to get the color schemes right, which is fine, but even the spacing sometimes is not correct. Like things are very, very tight, or there's just too much white space. So make sure that you also keep those things in mind to make sure your UI is clean. Also imagery. So again, the photos that you use, make sure that whatever photos or graphics that you use are like high quality photos. You don't want to show your UI and have something blurry or just doesn't look nice. And also make sure it's responsive, right? Make sure you have responsive design. So usually when you create an app, let's say like a web app or a website, you want to make sure that it actually responds to whatever platform you put it on. So if you look at a website on a mobile phone, make sure that it actually has all the interactivity and the different features that you have on the desktop version as well, or try to at least match it as much as possible, right? So make sure you keep that in mind if you're building an app that will do that. So yeah, pretty much UI design, again, is responsible for transferring a product's development and the research and the content and just the layout into a whole experience for users that it's attractive, that they find intuitive, and it's easy for them to for it to be self-guided and also very responsive, right? I think all these things coming together really helps the user stay within your app and actually want to use it, and that's something that's really important to keep the customer happy. So now we're going to talk about the difference between UI and UX. So the main difference is this: UX design is all about the overall feel of the experience, while UI design is all about how the product's interfaces look and function. So pretty much UX design, again, considers the user's entire journey to solve a problem. So UX design tries to find a solution to this problem and thinking about what steps you can take, right? What tasks does a user need to actually complete from beginning to end? And how straightforward is the whole experience? A lot of the work focuses on finding out what kinds of problems users come up against, so and how a certain product might actually solve them. So those are really important things to look at, to think about when you're looking at the UX. And then when it comes to the UI, on the other hand, it considers all the visual aspects, again, of the user journey. So this includes all the individual screens and touch points that the user might encounter. So when you create your application, make sure you think about how do you go from one screen to the next, and how do you go back from that screen to the first screen. That's something that sometimes people forget at the beginning when you start developing, and you just create different pages here and there, but then when you try to navigate everything, it can be a bit of a mess. So make sure that you have consistent menus, that you have back buttons, that you have all those kinds of things that make a good user design and overall experience. So for example, things like tapping a button, scrolling down a page, or even just swiping through a photo gallery, these are things that people just are so used to doing that these are things that they expect from the user interface. So make sure that you have those set up in there. So while UX design maps the whole user journey pretty much from beginning to end, the UI design focuses on all the details that make that journey actually possible. So that's not to say that the UI design is all about the looks, because UI design has a huge impact also on whether or not a product is accessible and inclusive. And again, you can ask yourself questions like, how can different color combinations be used to create contrast, or how can they enhance the readability of the content you have? And maybe you can have different color pairings to cater to people who are colorblind, right? So you'd have to think about accessibility as well. That's something that's pretty big, especially in industry, with so many people from all over the world using your mobile app or website or whatever it might be. Think about all those kinds of users as well. And that's something else that I will tell you guys for your projects again this weekend. If there's any way that you can think about your users and think about these edge cases like that you might need to actually address. Like if somebody colorblind ends up using your app, what are you gonna do to address that, right? So that might be something that maybe didn't come to mind for you first, but it's definitely something to not overlook, because in the real world you'll come across these cases, right? And if you show this to a judge, or you mention this in your project video, I'm pretty sure it's gonna really impress the judges a lot. So just a tip to you guys. So hopefully, you're now seeing how the UX and the UI design are two very different things. So to summarize again, UX design is all about the identifying and solving user problems. UI design is all about creating intuitive and aesthetically pleasing interactive interfaces. UX design usually comes first in the product development process, and then it's followed by the UI. So again, you first think about that journey and what the user is trying to accomplish, and then you build a UI around that. The UX designer usually maps out the whole bare bones of the user journey. And again, like I said, the UI designer fills it in with the visual and more interactive elements in that end. And sometimes, UX and UI designers can be two different people, but now in industry, more than ever, I do see mostly, UX, UI being just one role that you do. So you handle both of those parts of the process. And again, UX can apply to any kind of product, service, or experience. Don't just, think about it only catering to mobile apps and websites, but also just really anything that you do in real life. And again, the UI is specific to digital products and experiences in this case that will apply to your mobile apps and to your websites. So we've looked at the differences between UX and UI. So now we can look at how they actually work together. So you might be wondering if one is more important than the other, but in reality is that they're both actually equally important. And this is a quote from a designer. Her name is Helga Moreno. And she says that something that looks great but is difficult to use is exemplary of great UI and poor UX, while something very usable that looks terrible is exemplary of great UX but poor UI. So either way that you paint it, you can't have one without the other. It's really important that you have both a great UX and a great UI to make a product that's seamless, that's intuitive, that will be used by lots of people, and that they'll have a great experience with it. So, just trying to make sure to get those two things down as much as possible. Your UI might look amazing, but if you can't navigate your app and it's just really a pain to use, people are not going to like it. And if your user experience and your navigation is really amazing and great to go through it, but your UI looks really bad, it's not going to look very appealing. So either way, you can't win. The only way to win is to have both the UX and the UI be equally great. So now I want to go over some examples of different inconsistencies and issues with the UI and UX that you can observe. So for example, here, there's inconsistencies with the UI elements. So you can see on the left side and you can see on the right side. So the left side here is the one that is inconsistent. That's not really a great UI. And you see on the right side, the elements are consistent. The titles, the headers are following the same typography, same color, same weight. The descriptions is the same thing. The photos also have the same size pretty much, and it looks more harmonious in this case than it does on the left side, which looks a bit like more messy. So again, a tip to you guys: when you build your apps, make sure that they're consistent, that you use the same fonts, the same colors, the same secondary colors, the same kind of photography all throughout, or graphics. So that way your app looks very nicely put together. Something else too that you need to look out for is using the drop shadows. So the right side looks a lot nicer than the typical drop shadow you would find, like the one on the left. The left drop shadow uses black pretty much, which is why it looks that way. And the one on the right actually uses the same color that you're using, just a darker shade of it. So that way you can have it nicely like pop out without using like a drop shadow. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's just kind of outdated right now. So definitely look into how you can leverage these really nice shadows and gradients too that are used a lot these days. Now here's another one. So here, on the left side, there's a problem. So pretty much what's happening is that there's very little distinction between the primary and secondary actions or buttons, right? So, on the left side, the login button, I mean the login screen, I guess, looks fine. If you were just to, use it, you would kind of know what to do with it. But the confusing thing is that, those three actions, the login, sign up, and forgot password, have the same kind of priorities. So as a user, I'm entering my email address and then I'm putting my password, but then it's kind of hard to really, figure out which of those buttons to use, or they all just pop out at me at once, right? So the best way to do this is to make sure that you do what's on the right side. So have your primary action be the one that, stands out the most, and then create distinction between that and the other action items. So typically, most people will have an account already, I guess in this case. So the primary action will be to log in, which is why it's highlighted in blue and it stands out the most. And then sign up will be a secondary option that's like less used. And then the last thing is forgot password. So very, I guess, a very small fraction, I guess, of everybody that visits the website actually goes there for forgot password. So that's why it's a good idea to have that at the end. And again, I can't repeat this enough, but keep these things in mind as you build your projects this weekend. It will definitely make a big difference when you present your projects and you actually use them. So here's another example. Here, there is pretty much a lack of text hierarchy. So you can see on the left side at the top where it says, hey, welcome home. That has the same kind of, same size, same font and everything. And then even throughout the new song widgets, you can see that they all have the same size as well. There's no like sense of hierarchy within the typography, right? And that is something that you do see on the right side. You see pretty much the hey message at the top, and then underneath it is just the welcome message, which is a little less important. And then when it comes to song widgets, you can see actually the names of the songs, I believe, are the ones that have the larger font. And then underneath, it's like the artist and all the other details. And that kind of like fades into the background a little. And it just makes it a little easier and easier to read. And you already know like that, the main text in there that's highlighted is the name of the song. If you were to look at this on the left side, it will be kind of hard to really like tell apart, the name of the song with the number of songs and all that. So definitely that's something to keep in mind. Keep things, again, like I said before, keep things consistent, but also create some kind of hierarchy to where you can differentiate the different priorities of the different items that you're working with. Here's another one. In this one, pretty much is just another inconsistency in iconography. So as you can see on the left side, we have three icons, but for example, the first one with the alarm clock is fully filled in black. The second one is using an outline. The third one is using an outline again, but it's just a thicker stroke around the graphic. So if you use these three graphics for the same application, same project, or for your menu, let's say, or the bar at the bottom of your mobile app, it's not going to look as nice. And then, if you use the one on the right, you can see that they're all outlined. They're all very similar and they're consistent. So you would rather use the ones on the right to add that to your design. to the different actions that you have on your mobile app or your website. And make sure you keep those in mind. And again, these icons, you can easily find icons online. There's tons of free resources. There's Free Pick, Vector Easy, and there's a bunch of different things. Flat icon that you can go to and download these. But you can also create your own, and you can do that through Adobe Illustrator and different other tools that allow you to create vector graphics. So if you want to make something from scratch, you can definitely do that. I actually highly recommend doing that instead. It's just a great way to learn how to create your own designs. Here's another example. So what's going on here is that we have unaligned elements. So you can see pretty much on the left side that the top is center aligned, and the little the 3 lines there are left aligned. On the right side, everything is left aligned and looks neater and more consistent. So something that a lot of people make mistake, and I used to make this mistake a lot too, especially when I started out with graphic design, was trying to center everything and center the titles, center the text, center everything. And over time and learning through my studies in graphic design and looking at other examples just for inspiration, I was able to really see that it's best to sometimes just align things one way, especially left aligned, because it just makes it a lot easier to read. The human eye already knows where to begin and when to end when you read the sentence. So whenever you finish reading a line, you know exactly at which point to go back to read to the next line, right? If let's say we were to center align everything, it's kind of hard and it's more work on the eyes and it's just less user friendly. So that's why you definitely want to make sure that everything is aligned a certain way. And when in doubt, just left align everything. And like I said, it just makes it a lot easier for people to read the text more naturally. Here's another example. In this one, we have a difference in contrast. So you can see on the left side, the contrast is pretty bad. If you see, the icon in the middle with the user and then the gray around it, it's really hard to see. It kind of hurts the eyes to see the purple against the gray, right? So think about how you can actually create contrast within the items that you have in your UI. As you can see on the right side, it looks very nice. Pretty much just using the purple against the white. There's a lot of contrast right there. Same thing with the text. Text is black or gray against the white. That also looks really good. So make sure to keep those things in mind as you create your designs and build your projects this weekend. Here's another one. So this one is pretty much confusing forms. And this is more about how you actually tell the user, hey, you did something wrong, right? So for example, on the left side, somebody put their email, put their password, but all they got was just an error message, just this error, right? And yeah, it's an error, but it doesn't tell the user anything. The user doesn't know what kind of error was this, and what do I need to do to kind of move on and get some help, right? And that's what's actually happening on the right side. As you notice, the password, the entire password field is highlighted in red, which actually tells you that the issue is with the password. If you look at it on the left side, it tells you error, but you don't know if the error is from the email or from the password. So again, the right side is a lot more user-friendly and easy to understand. And it gives you a message saying, hey, password's incorrect. If you don't remember your password, then here's a link to reset it. Which just makes it a lot easier for the user to do that. Now in this one, pretty much what's happening is we have a poor touch target on both mobile and tablet devices. So if you look at the left side, the button to follow and the button to pretty much just ignore or X out that person is very close. And the X button is very tiny too. So it's very hard to get to. So it would be very easy for somebody to just go, maybe I actually want to follow this person, but I end up just Xing them out, right? Or maybe I want to X them out and I end up actually following them. So either way, your users are going to be happy about that. So again, make sure that when you design, you think about the spacing between the different elements. So look at the right side, you have your follow buttons and you have, the X's next to them. And there's some white space in between, and the X's are a little bigger, so you're able to actually, tap them and know that you're actually, Xing that person out. And again, that's something that's really important. Definitely take advantage of the white space you have. Leave room for the elements to breathe within the UI, so that way it makes it easier for the user to use it. And now the last example I got for you guys. So here, it's pretty obvious, again, using pretty much low quality images in your designs. Make sure that, when you save these images, that they're high quality, that, they actually are the size of, let's say, the dimensions that you're working with for the mobile app or the website, or even higher if you can. So that way users are not turned off by looking at it and seeing this blurry photo, coming up. It's part of creating a good experience to make sure that everything looks seamless and looks neat and professional. So yeah, so those are some examples, again, that you can see of how important really the UI and the UX are when it comes to just creating applications. These are maybe things that you might not think about at first, that maybe are okay to you, or that you just didn't really consider before, but definitely keep those things in mind. I think all these little things, when you add them all up together, they make a huge difference. So don't underestimate the power of the UI and the UX in this case. And again, this is why the UI and the UX go hand in hand. So, imagine you come up with an awesome idea for an app. You research the user, figure out exactly what features they need, how the whole user journey is like, and then it should be mapped out. And your app offers something that your target audience actually needs and wants. But when they actually download it, they find that the text on each screen is barely legible, or maybe the buttons are too close together, or they just keep hitting the wrong button by mistake, like in the example I was just doing, right? And again, this is a classic case of bad UI that's ruining what could have been a really good UX. And on the other hand, if you might find a really nice looking website, only to find out that it's actually a real pain to use. And good UI can never really make up for bad UX. So when it comes to product design, UX and UI really complement each other a lot. And with how competitive the market is right now, getting both aspects of the product is definitely important. And this weekend, again, I keep mentioning it, but definitely for your projects, make sure to keep these things in mind. It's definitely important when it comes to judging and all that. So now I'm going to proceed to talk to you guys about the UI and UX design process and how it works. So this is pretty much what you need to think about when you start working on your projects this weekend. Think about this entire process and how you can actually go from idea all the way to implementing your project using code and everything else. So the UI UX design process has 4 different phases here. We have the user research phase, design phase, testing, and implementation. And during the user research phase, you'll find out who the target users are for your product and what their needs are in relation to the product that you're making. This is really important in order to be able to target the application to a certain audience and figure that out early on. Then in the design phase, you'll map out the user's journey across a product, and then also consider things like the information architecture, which is how you lay out all the content in the application. You'll also create wireframes, which set out the different blueprints for the product that you'll actually be making. And that's something that actually will be done in the next workshop after this on UI UX prototyping. So I definitely recommend you check that workshop after this so you can actually create these wireframes. With the skeleton of the product already mapped out, you can then create high fidelity prototypes, which can then be tested by your users. And at that point, after testing, you can get a lot of feedback about what things are working, what things are not working, and then make those changes as you need. And after testing, then you can bring your design to life by pretty much implementing it through code. So we'll start with user research. So user research is essential to the UX design process, and it's the starting point for any UX design project. So through research, we pretty much learn about the users, their behavior, their goals, motivations, and their needs. It also shows us how they currently navigate the system. So, if there's already a product that's out there and you want to see what issues they're having, they can definitely, doing user research definitely allows you to find that out. The users can tell you where they actually come up with any problems, how they actually feel when they interact with the product. Do they feel any frustration? Do they feel actually like they're having a good time? Are they actually getting what they need done with the product? That's something that's really important for you to keep in consideration. And it's also important to remember that what you think is intuitive might not actually be working for your users. And it's also important to realize as well that what you're building is not for you necessarily, but it's also for a wider audience of people. So sometimes like you might build something that looks really cool to you, that you think, that you really enjoy, and then you don't mind it looking this way. But if you're making this for a lot of people, you need to realize that you need to take all of their, opinions and feedback into account and make something that's widely accessible. And again, this is why conducting researches with actual users is so important. So typically when you would create a product, you would try to do user research, so that way users can tell you, hey, this is what I actually need done. These are the problems that I've been having with this other application that I'm using that I don't really like too much. Can you guys do something better for me? Like, can you create something that will fix all these issues and that will actually make me want to use the application, right? And the way to do that is by conducting interviews with users, or you can even create online surveys. And something else you can do as well that I guess would be easier for you guys this weekend is writing up personas. So a persona is pretty much like think of it as a user, or like pretty much a user, yeah, that's utilizing your application and actually going through a journey. So for example, you might have persona X that is looking to purchase Y item through Amazon. And then you have to lay out the pretty much the story behind it, right? So how does this person get from point A to point B? They will have to first, download the application, then open the application, then navigate to the search tab, then enter whatever they're searching for, and then get the list of results, and then select the item they want, and then after that add to cart. And it's a whole entire process that you have to think about. So this weekend you guys don't have a ton of time, but definitely think about at least one or two personas that would be potential users for your product, and how you would actually tailor it around that. And yeah, and again, the last thing is just doing user testing. So users you can always give them, the application that you're building, and they can actually play with it, test it out, and tell you like, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that. Can you move this? Can you move that? So these are definitely great ways for you to actually get this information. So if there's one word I want you to really take away from this presentation, it's empathy. And that's something that's really important when it comes to UI UX design. When you're designing, you'll be working with, again, like I said, groups of users who come from a variety of backgrounds and have a lot of different experiences. So as a UI UX designer, or even just as a software engineer, when you're building a product, your job is to try to understand why it is that your users are behaving a certain way, and not to try to change their behavior or influence it, but to actually try to accommodate it within what you're building. And this is pretty much what empathy is all about. So the second step in the UX design process is pretty much to create the wireframes and prototypes. And what this does is it gives you something tangible to actually test on the real and potential users, which is really crucial in making sure that your designs are usable. And this means designing a satisfying user experience, and it involves, planning a whole customer journey for the users, which is something I've been mentioning a lot. Think about, how somebody gets from point A to point B in your product, right? And pretty much just helping them find what they're looking for. Customers will usually follow a certain process or journey anyway when they're performing an action, and this will be based on previous experiences they had. So something that I will tell you guys is, don't try to recreate the wheel. Look at what's out there, see how other apps work, and use those same kind of design patterns that are out there. There's a reason why design patterns are a thing, and it's something that everybody follows. And people don't just try to come up with some crazy, designs or crazy patterns that haven't been tested out yet. So you want to make sure that whatever you're using is actually something that customers are maybe familiar with and can actually easily adjust to your product. So again, your job is to just think about how you can accommodate the users to how the customer already behaves. And really, the design of your product revolves around both functionality and usability, rather than the colors of the pictures that you're using. Obviously, those things are things to consider and great to have, but always think about the functionality. Think about how they actually use the product itself. How do they navigate your application? All of that can either make or break a UX for the user. Now, the next thing is design. So a user who is overwhelmed by too much information or just gets lost navigating through a website is going to have a bad experience with the product they're using, no matter what. So to avoid these scenarios, we do something called information architecture. So the purpose of it is pretty much just to structure or just organize and label the content on a website so that users can find exactly what they need to perform the task that they want and to reach their goal. And this is what I've mentioned previously already. Again, try to lay out everything in a way that makes sense in your design so that way users can get from point A to point B. And through the information architecture, a UX designer finds out not only how each piece of the site fits together, but also how each item relates to all the items that are part of that structure. So what this process does is it helps the user understand what to expect when they navigate the website. They're so used to just seeing all the websites and apps out there. Again, if you have a layout that you create and you structure your design in a certain way, users will know what to expect when they visit it. They'll know they'll be able to actually scroll down through the mobile application or just go and swipe through photos and things like that. It's just what's expected for the user. Now for design, we have wireframing in UX design, which refers to an illustration or diagram of a website, software, or app. Pretty much what it looks at is the allocation of space on a page, the distribution of the images and the content, and also how the content is prioritized. I already spoke about this before in one of the examples, but make sure that you prioritize the action items that you have in your UI. Also, what functions are available to you and what kind of behavior is intended and accommodated for the user. So wireframes, rarely contain any color or like images or styling, just because their job is to just help understand and set relationships among a websites or a mobile apps, different templates, and they need to be determined before taking into account any styling of colors or shapes. So before you start thinking about color schemes, thinking about typography, thinking about any of that, make sure that you get your wireframes down right at the beginning, so that way you can build on top of that. Again, this weekend, you only have a certain amount of time, but if you can make a few wireframes just to show like how you were going about designing your product, it will really impress the judges, especially if you show that you went from having an idea to then creating a wireframe for it and then actually coding it out and designing something really cool. So again, by focusing first on the navigation and the structure of the website or the product, you're less likely to also become distracted by the visual layer in this case. And there are a lot of awesome wireframing tools out there, and I'll actually be going over a few of those in the next few slides, and you'll be able to do that in the next workshop. So after creating your wireframe, you can then move on to creating an actual prototype. And the prototype is a bit closer to your final product in this case. This is pretty much a draft version of your website or product that is, again, as close as possible to what you're designing and what you will actually want to code at the very end for your final product. And what this allows you to do is pretty much to explore and just experiment with different ideas. And also you can check functionality and the usability before you start to develop. So a prototype is great because, again, a lot of tools these days allow you to push your prototype to a mobile phone, for example, and you can actually, it's almost like a final version of it where you can tap and it's interactive and you can move around and you can navigate through it. And by doing that through a prototype, you're actually able to test out some of the usability. And if you come across any issues, you can go back and fix that. And that's definitely a lot better than, let's say, not doing any of that and then going straight to coding. And then once you code it all out, you figure out that, hey, maybe this was a bad idea to actually implement. Maybe I should have done this differently. So definitely make sure you prototype, you create your wireframes, and you do that before you actually start coding and start developing your project. And again, by building a prototype of your design, you will definitely save a lot of time when it comes to development. You won't have to keep going back and making fixes here and there. So next, we're almost done. Next is testing. So testing is, again, a really core part of the overall UX design process, and it allows you to improve upon the original product of the site design that you created. As I said, you can get a lot of feedback from the users, and even when you use the actual prototype, you can test it out and also see how the usability works. And it's a great way just to eliminate any problems, any user issues that maybe you did not see in the design phase before you move on to the implementation phase and you start coding. So one way of doing that is through usability testing. And usability testing is usually a one-to-one usability session with an actual user that you will have, right? So pretty much the idea is for the person participating to use your product, use the website or the app you're making, and for you to actually observe how they're actually using it and what struggles are coming on, across, right? So again, there's different methods for user testing. So you can literally just observe how they use the application. You can also provide questionnaires, surveys, and just interviews. And this allows you to get really helpful feedback for you to implement into your design and make those changes as you need them. And finally, we have implementation. So in the implementation stage, it's all about pretty much just coding. And this is where you actually create your design through code, which you can do with many technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, you name it. There's a lot of them out there. And UI UX tools sometimes also provide code for styling. So you can get the CSS code, which has the properties of the objects you design in some of the tools, and you can use that for your project. So definitely, when you use these tools to create your mockups, there's definitely sometimes CSS code that you can adopt and move to your code. So it's definitely helpful, and it will make sure that it matches what you designed. So speaking of UI UX tools, there's quite a few out there, but I definitely want to highlight 3 of these tools. So we have Sketch, which is the very first one, Figma, and Adobe XD. So just to quickly, I guess, just recap on these. So Sketch is, I guess, pretty much just referring to the differences here. So Sketch pretty much is a Mac-only app that allows you to create, again, the wireframes and the user journeys and everything that you need. Figma is one of the most recent ones, and it's been very popular lately. I've actually been using it a lot, and I think I got a lot of people in UPE to convert to Figma. So it's very easy to use. And the cool thing about it too is that Figma is a web app. So pretty much what you do is you just can log in from anywhere. And it also has like, excuse me, it has a lot of really good sharing capabilities. So think about it as the Google Docs of design. Figma allows you to pretty much share your design with anybody you want, and everybody can just go at it and help you move things around and just look at it. It's really cool to work collaboratively through Figma. And last but not least, we have Adobe XD, which is also very new, very recent, but it also allows you to create great wireframes and great mockups for your designs. And this is an Adobe product that's part of the whole Adobe family of software. So I believe for the next workshop, you guys will be using Adobe XD. So definitely, if you have not downloaded Adobe XD, I definitely suggest you do that so you're prepared for it. You can also find the links to download Adobe XD and other requirements for the workshop on your Hacker's Guide. So make sure you check the guide out for that. So to wrap it up, I was actually going to do some ideation with you guys, come up with some ideas, maybe in the chat if you have any. I do see I have like about 10 minutes left. So we can either do that or we can do Q&A if you guys want. So I'm going to exit this out for a second and go back to the chat and see all this. Ooh, that's a lot of comments. All right, so what do you guys want to do? You guys want to do a Q&A, or do you want to, like, I don't know, put out some ideas and we start chatting about how we can figure out our users and all that? Q&A? Okay, yeah, we don't have a lot of time. Well, we can do both, I guess, up to you guys. If you come up with an idea, I'm happy to bring it up and then have you guys just go at it and do all that. So first question I got, can you say what programs were used in this presentation again? So you're referring to the UI UX design programs, or like what I used to create the PowerPoint, like the presentation? Okay, the UI UX design one. So it's Sketch. I'm gonna write them here in the chat. Sketch, Figma, and Adobe XD. Sketch, I think you actually have to pay for. Figma, there's like a free tier, I think, and then Adobe XD is completely free. So that's another difference between some of those. Next question, where can we find recording of the session? So if I'm not mistaken, after the workshops are done, Hopin actually saves a recording of them. So I think the organizers are gonna share those recordings after like the workshops are done. So I might be wrong, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's how it's working. And something I can do as well is I can share the slides in the design track channel on Discord, so you guys can always take a look at that if you want. Do I do UI UX design in JPM? So I'm mostly focusing on software engineering at JPM, which I also really enjoy. But I myself have found ways of integrating UI UX and doing that into my whole development process. And it's something that I personally have contributed to the team in that a lot, and even getting other people in the team to also do that as well. So it's definitely something that you can actually do at JPM. And I know some teams that do focus on UI UX engineering. So that's also some pretty cool roles to have as well. I'm actually a little bit jealous of them because I would love to do that if I was to be in one of those teams. You can always ask questions in the design chat on Discord. Yes. So like Shauna said, if you have any questions about any of this or any UI UX design things over the weekend, you can check that out on Discord, or you can tag me. Shauna also, she's the one actually teaching the next workshop. She does an amazing job with all our marketing and designs. So, you can definitely hit her up as well. How do you personally use design in your work? I guess I kind of just went over that, but yeah, I've been through quite a few projects already at JPM, and every time I'm assigned to a project, I'm always starting out from the user research stage and just thinking about, who am I building this for? What do they actually need? What features do they want? Is there something else out there that already exists? And is there any issues from that I can actually fix on my own design? And then after that, coming up with a prototype and then actually coding it out. So I've been able to do that a couple of times already, which has been really cool for me to do so. That's how I try to really implement design in my work. What programs are used most often for UI UX, or is it dependent on the kind of project being used? Well, again, like I said, those three programs are some of the more popular ones that you can use. It doesn't depend on the project that you're doing. I mean, for these three allow you to create UIs for anything you want, for mobile apps, for websites. You pretty much have a lot of freedom to create any UI you want for any kind of project. There's also an education tier of Figma. Yeah, I believe so, right? I hadn't looked into that, but yeah, it seems like there is. So definitely check that out if you can. Yeah, so Diana just said after the hackathon, yeah. So after ShellHacks, all the recordings will be up pretty much from all the workshops. If I have never used Figma before, would it be hard to pick up for the sake of the project on the weekend? Not at all, actually. Figma is very easy to use. And the cool thing too is that once you join and you sign up, they give you like a tutorial kind of template, which walks you through different steps. There's the most basic things pretty much that you can do in Figma. And after that, you are pretty much free to just grab a template or just create anything from scratch. So I definitely recommend you check Figma out, at least for a little bit, play around with it. That's something that I really like about a lot of the design applications. I think even dating back to, like I mentioned earlier, when I was in middle school and I started getting into graphic design, I started using Adobe Illustrator as my very first application just to create vectors and just draw things. And it was just really fun to just pick up tools and test different things out, So that is something that I would definitely recommend in this case for Figma as well. Play around with it, follow the tutorial that they provide. It's really, really handy. And again, the next workshop is an Adobe XD for prototyping. So you can also learn that way. And if you learn Adobe XD, it's pretty easy to pick up Figma too. So they're all very similar in terms of their layout and their features. Which one do you use frequently and why? Well, so lately I've been using Figma the most. Again, it's mostly because it's just easier to collaborate, especially within the firm. If somebody else wants to look at my design, check it out, maybe provide a couple of suggestions, you can actually leave comments like you would in Google Docs on Figma. So by doing that, I'm able to see some feedback and go off on that, and it's just very handy, very easy to do that. It also helps that it's a web app as well, but they also have a desktop app for it that you can download. But with the web app, it just makes it easier for people to actually look at it and for me to share it with more people, and they don't have to install Figma or anything. Let's see. Do you know any computer engineer within JPM? I mean, there are some computer engineering majors I think that have joined the firm. I don't know any specifically that work on hardware per se. Again, because JPM is mostly like on the software side, but yeah. What's next? Sketch is Apple locked too. Yeah, Sketch is Apple only. Adobe XD, yep, it's free. Yeah, Figma is really quick to pick up. Yeah, definitely. Like Michaela said, it's very easy to pick up, and in a few hours you can get a really good prototype running. Where can you find the color palette for colorblind people? That's a good question. I think if you go, I mean, the easiest thing to tell you, to be honest, is just to like search it in Google and I guess find it that way. For JPM, we have like an internal like design guide that tells us which are the hex colors to use for different scenarios and different UIs. So obviously I can't share that with you guys, but I'm pretty sure you can find very similar things on the web. Are wireframes very detailed? What if the type of user changes like admin versus a normal user? Do you create separate wireframes for that? Yeah, so wireframes don't have to be super detailed. Again, they're not really a prototype. And when it comes to the different users, yes. So these are the different personas that you have that I was talking about, right? So think about your normal user and your admin user. They're going to see things from two different ends, right? So they're going to be able to have possibly different kinds of features and different things going on. So definitely keep in mind when you create your prototype, I mean, or your wireframes, do two different ones, I guess, or do two wireframes, four wireframe stories in that set. So do one for the user and do one for the admin side. Maybe there's certain screens where they both like share, but maybe there's a few things like, maybe on the admin side, you have like settings and you have all these different things that would not be accessible to a user, right? So definitely think about those things as well when you create your wireframes. The 3 applications were listed. When is the next workshop for Adobe XD? Right after? Yeah, it's at midnight, so it's in about 1 minute. So pretty much I'm out of time. So again, thank you guys so much for coming to the workshop. I hope you got some really good information out of this. I hope I was able to answer all your questions. Again, when you're building a project this weekend, really think about what problem you're trying to solve. Think about the user. Think about how you can make your UI and UX the best thing possible. And again, it's very easy to just learn from these prototyping tools and download them for free. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it and get ready for Adobe XD next. All right, thank you guys.